harder you try to fall asleep, the more awake you become. The more you try to be funny, the less funny you are. The harder you chase success, the more it eludes you.
This is the effort paradox and one of the most counterintuitive truths about human psychology. The very act of trying harder often guarantees the opposite of what you want. And understanding why this happens can transform not just how you approach your goals, but how you understand the nature of achievement itself. The illusion of control. We live in a culture obsessed with effort. Work harder, try harder, push harder. We're told that success is simply a matter of applying more force, more determination, more willpower. But this belief is not just wrong, it's actively harmful. It creates a cycle of frustration where increased effort leads to decreased results, which leads to even more effort, which leads to even worse results. Think about the last time you were really stressed about something important. Maybe it was a job interview, a first date, or a presentation. The more important it felt, the harder you tried to control every detail. And what happened? You probably performed worse than you would have if you just relaxed and been yourself. This isn't a coincidence, it's the effort paradox in action. Carl Jung understood something profound about human nature that our achievement-obsessed culture has forgotten. He recognized that the conscious mind's attempts to control outcomes often interfere with the unconscious mind's natural ability to perform. When you try too hard, you're essentially getting in your own way. The effort paradox shows up everywhere in life, but we rarely recognize it because it contradicts everything we've been taught about success. We see someone struggling and think they need to try harder. We see ourselves failing and assume we need more effort. But often the opposite is true. Often the trying itself is the problem. The psychology of overthinking. When you try too hard, you activate what psychologists call the monitoring process. Your conscious mind starts watching and evaluating your performance in real time. This creates a split in your attention between doing the task and monitoring how well you're doing the task. And this split is where performance breaks down. Think about walking. You've been walking for most of your life, and you do it automatically without thinking. But if I asked you to walk across a room while consciously thinking about every step, every muscle movement, every shift in balance, you'd probably stumble. This is because conscious monitoring interferes with unconscious competence. The same thing happens with more complex skills. When you try too hard to be charming on a date, you become self-conscious and awkward. When you try too hard to be creative, you become blocked and frustrated. When you try too hard to fall asleep, you become alert and anxious. The effort itself creates the very state of mind that prevents success. Jung called this the interference of the ego with the natural flow of the psyche. Your ego, your conscious sense of self, wants to control outcomes. But many of the things you want most in life, love, creativity, peace, flow states, emerge from the unconscious and can't be forced through conscious effort. This is why some of your best performances happen when you're not trying at all, when you're relaxed, present, and trusting your natural abilities. When you're in what athletes call the zone, a state where conscious effort disappears and performance becomes effortless. The paradox of willpower. Our culture worships willpower. We believe that if you just have enough discipline, enough determination, enough grit, you can achieve anything. But research in psychology has revealed something surprising about willpower. It's a finite resource that depletes with use, and trying to force it often backfires. When you rely heavily on willpower to change a behavior, you're essentially fighting against your own psychology. You're using conscious effort to override unconscious patterns. This works temporarily, but it's exhausting and unsustainable. Eventually, willpower fatigue sets in, and you revert to old patterns, often with a vengeance. This is why most diets fail. People try to use willpower to override their natural eating patterns. They succeed for a while through sheer force of will, but eventually the effort becomes too much to sustain. They break down, binge, and end up worse than when they started. The harder they tried, the more spectacular their failure. The same pattern shows up with other behavioral changes. The person who tries to force themselves to be more social often becomes more anxious and withdrawn. The person who tries to force themselves to be more confident often becomes more self-conscious and insecure. The person who tries to force themselves to be happier often becomes more depressed. This doesn't mean that change is impossible. It means that forced change is often counterproductive. Real, lasting change usually happens through understanding, acceptance, and gentle redirection, rather than through brute force effort. The anxiety amplification effect. Nowhere is the effort paradox more evident than in anxiety. The more you try to control your anxiety, the more anxious you become. The more you try to stop worrying, the more you worry. The more you try to calm down, the more agitated you feel. This happens because anxiety is fundamentally about the fear of losing control. When you try to control your anxiety through effort, you're reinforcing the very belief that creates anxiety in the first place. The belief that you need to control your internal state to be okay. Think about panic attacks. They're terrifying precisely because they feel uncontrollable. And what do most people do when they feel a panic attack coming on? They try harder to control it. They fight against the sensations, resist the feelings, and attempt to force themselves to calm down. But this resistance actually intensifies the panic because it confirms the mind's belief that something dangerous is happening that needs to be controlled. The counterintuitive solution to anxiety is often to stop trying to control it, to accept the feelings, allow them to be there, and trust that they will pass naturally. This approach, which therapists call acceptance, often reduces anxiety more effectively than any amount of effort or resistance. Jung understood this deeply. He recognized that what we resist persists and what we accept transforms. The parts of ourselves that we fight against become stronger. The parts of ourselves that we accept with compassion often naturally evolve and change. The creativity killer. The effort paradox is particularly destructive to creativity. Creativity emerges from the unconscious mind, from the realm of dreams, intuition, and spontaneous insight. But when you try too hard to be creative, you activate the conscious analytical mind, which is the enemy of creative flow. Think about the last time you had a great idea. It probably didn't come when you were sitting at your desk, straining to think of something brilliant. It probably came when you were in the shower, taking a walk, or just waking up from sleep. It emerged effortlessly from your unconscious when your conscious mind was relaxed and not trying to control the process. This is why many artists and writers have rituals that seem to have nothing to do with their craft. They take long walks, meditate, or engage in repetitive activities that quiet the conscious mind and allow the unconscious to emerge. They understand intuitively that creativity can't be forced. It can only be invited. The effort paradox in creativity is particularly cruel because our culture demands creative output on schedule. We're expected to be innovative and original on command. But creativity doesn't work that way. The more pressure you put on yourself to be creative, the more blocked you become. The harder you try to force inspiration, the more elusive it becomes. This is why some of the most creative people in the world have learned to work with their natural rhythms rather than against them. They create conditions that invite creativity rather than demanding it. They trust the process rather than trying to control the outcome. The relationship trap. The effort paradox is especially painful in relationships. The harder you try to make someone like you, the less attractive you become. The more you try to control your partner's behavior, the more they resist. The harder you work to avoid conflict, the more tension builds up. This happens because authentic relationships require vulnerability, spontaneity, and genuine expression, all of which are impossible when you're trying too hard to manage outcomes. When you're focused on controlling how others perceive you, you can't be authentically yourself. And people are naturally drawn to authenticity, not performance. Think about the difference between someone who's trying to impress you and someone who's genuinely being themselves. The person who's trying too hard feels exhausting to be around. They're so focused on managing your impression of them that they can't actually connect with you. Meanwhile, the person who's relaxed and authentic feels easy and natural to be with. The effort paradox in relationships extends to trying to change your partner. The more you try to fix or improve someone else, the more they resist your efforts. This is because being the target of someone's improvement project feels like being rejected for who you are. People change when they feel accepted. not when they feel pressured to be different. This doesn't mean being passive in relationships. It means understanding the difference between effort that comes from love and acceptance versus effort that comes from fear and control. Healthy relationship effort feels natural and sustainable. Unhealthy relationship effort feels forced and exhausting. The performance paradox. A player who tries too hard to make the crucial shot usually misses. This is why sports psychology focuses so much on mental training. Elite athletes learn to trust their training, stay present, and let their natural abilities flow rather than trying to force perfect performance. They understand that peak performance happens in a state of relaxed concentration. The happiness trap. Perhaps nowhere is the effort paradox more counterintuitive than with happiness. The harder you try to be happy, the more elusive happiness becomes. The more you focus on your emotional state and try to optimize it, the more self-conscious and dissatisfied you feel. This happens because happiness is a byproduct of engagement, meaning, and connection, not a goal to be pursued directly. When you make happiness your primary objective, you become focused on your internal state rather than on the activities and relationships that naturally generate happiness. Think about the times when you've been happiest. You probably weren't thinking about happiness at all. You were probably absorbed in something meaningful, connected with people you care about, or engaged in activities that challenged and fulfilled you. Happiness emerged naturally from these experiences without any effort to create it. The effort paradox of happiness is particularly relevant in our current cultural moment, where happiness has become an industry. We're constantly told that we should be optimizing our mood, tracking our well-being, and working harder to be happier. But this focus on happiness as a goal often makes people more anxious and dissatisfied, not less. Jung understood that meaning is more important than happiness. When you're engaged in something meaningful, happiness often follows naturally. But when you chase happiness directly, you often end up feeling empty and purposeless, no matter how many positive emotions you manage to generate. The wisdom of Wu Wei. The ancient Chinese concept of Wu Wei offers a profound alternative to our culture's obsession with effort. Wu Wei is often translated as non-action or effortless action, but it's better understood as acting in accordance with natural flow rather than against it. Wu Wei doesn't mean being passive or lazy. It means learning to distinguish between productive effort and counterproductive effort. It means understanding when to push and when to yield, when to act and when to wait, when to try harder and when to let go. In nature, water demonstrates Wu Wei perfectly. Water doesn't try to overcome obstacles. It flows around them. It doesn't force its way through rock. It patiently wears it away. Water is incredibly powerful, but its power comes from working with natural forces rather than against them. You can apply Wu Wei to any area of your life. Instead of trying to force solutions to problems, you can create conditions that allow solutions to emerge naturally. Instead of trying to control outcomes, you can focus on the process and trust that good outcomes will follow from good process. This doesn't mean abandoning goals or becoming passive. It means learning to pursue your goals in a way that works with your psychology rather than against it. It means understanding that sustainable success comes from alignment, not force. The art of strategic laziness. One of the most counterintuitive applications of the effort paradox is what we might call strategic laziness, the deliberate choice to do less in order to achieve more. This isn't about being lazy in the conventional sense. It's about understanding that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is nothing. Think about problem solving. When you're stuck on a difficult problem, your instinct is probably to try harder, think more, and push through the mental block. But often the breakthrough comes when you stop trying and let your unconscious mind work on the problem. This is why solutions often come to you in the shower or while you're taking a walk. Strategic laziness means building rest, reflection, and non-doing into your approach to goals. It means understanding that your unconscious mind is often smarter than your conscious mind and giving it space to work. It means trusting that sometimes the best action is no action. This principle applies to many areas of life. Sometimes the best way to solve a relationship problem is to stop trying to solve it and just be present with your partner. Sometimes the best way to overcome creative block is to stop trying to create and do something completely different. Sometimes the best way to reduce anxiety is to stop trying to control it and just let it be. Strategic laziness requires a fundamental shift in how you think about productivity and achievement. Instead of measuring success by how hard you're trying, you start measuring it by how effectively you're achieving your goals. Instead of glorifying struggle, you start valuing ease and flow. Breaking free from the effort trap. The first step to escaping the effort paradox is recognizing when you're caught in it. Notice when increased effort is leading to decreased results. Notice when trying harder is making you more frustrated, not less. Notice when your attempts to control outcomes are creating the very problems you're trying to solve. Once you recognize the pattern, you can start experimenting with different approaches. Instead of trying harder, try differently. Instead of forcing solutions, create conditions that allow solutions to emerge. Instead of controlling outcomes, focus on the process and trust the results. This requires developing what psychologists call tolerance for uncertainty. The effort paradox often kicks in when we're anxious about outcomes and try to control them through increased effort. Learning to be comfortable with not knowing how things will turn out is essential for breaking free from this pattern. It also requires developing trust in your natural abilities and in the natural unfolding of events. This doesn't mean being passive or fatalistic. It means understanding that your conscious efforts are just one part of a larger system that includes your unconscious mind, other people, and circumstances beyond your control. The paradox resolution. The resolution to the effort paradox isn't to stop trying altogether. It's to learn when to try and when to let go. It's to understand the difference between productive effort and counterproductive effort. It's to develop the wisdom to know when more force will help and when it will hurt. This wisdom comes from experience, self-awareness, and a willingness to experiment with different approaches. It comes from paying attention to what actually works rather than what you think should work. It comes from being honest about when your efforts are helping and when they're hurting. The goal isn't to eliminate effort from your life. It's to make your efforts more effective by aligning them with natural principles rather than fighting against them. When you understand the effort paradox, you can achieve more by trying less, perform better by relaxing more, and find greater success by forcing less. This is perhaps the most liberating insight of all. You don't have to struggle so hard. You don't have to force every outcome. You don't have to control every variable. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is trust the process, relax into the moment, and let your natural abilities flow. If this exploration of the effort paradox has opened your eyes to the counterintuitive nature of achievement and success, you'll find our channel full of similar insights. We explore the psychological paradoxes that govern human behavior, from why having more choices makes you miserable, to why helping others can hurt you, to why chasing happiness guarantees misery. These aren't just interesting ideas. They're practical insights that can transform how you approach every area of your life. Subscribe and discover the fascinating world of psychological paradoxes that most people never understand.